And so in my opinion, the most effective breathing technique is 4-8 breathing. So this is where you're taking really long, slow, deep breaths, diaphragmatic breathing. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But diaphragmatic breathing basically means you need to relax your belly when you breathe. A lot of us have tension there, and we're not breathing as deeply as we could be. But those 4-8 numbers, 4-8 breathing, refer to the length of your inhale and the length of your exhale.
In this episode of Navigating Life's Currents, we sit down with Joni Stamford, a beacon of holistic health and mindfulness. As a licensed professional counselor with a tapestry of expertise in yoga, mindfulness, and nutrition, Joni has dedicated over 2 decades to guiding individuals through the ebbs and flows of life. Her approach is deeply rooted in the belief that true well-being encompasses the mind, body, and soul, offering a sanctuary for those seeking to find balance, purpose, and peace amidst life's tumultuous waters. Join us today as we dive into Joni's journey, exploring her transformative practices and the profound insights she's gathered along the way, all aimed at navigating the currents of life with grace and resilience. I'm so excited today to have my personal therapist, by the way, here on the show today. So thanks for being here. And you also got this new book coming out.
I do.
The Space to Choose, A Path to Life Mastery. And how will they be able to buy that book?
On Amazon. It'll be available starting March 15th.
Yeah, so we'll put the link down there for people to buy the book. I would say buy the book before you even get into this podcast, because I already know that you're going to crush it. So first question I got, Joni, share with me a pivotal moment in your life that led you to pursue a career in counseling and holistic health.
Well, I would say the first thing that led me down this path was realizing when I was in my early 20s that I was a basket case. I was in marketing and public relations, and I felt angry all the time. I felt really stressed all the time. In particular, I remember having road rage as I would drive downtown to work. I know, I'm sure that doesn't sound like me.
Oh, I mean, Pittsburgh, right?
Pittsburgh,
yeah. Well, you have a very good reason for road rage in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's very complicated.
Well, I remember after I took my first yoga class, actually, and the next time after that, driving downtown and kind of having this moment of self-awareness where I was able to see myself freaking out. And I decided I didn't want to be like that anymore. And so I started practicing yoga more. I learned about meditation. And for the first time in my life, I started to feel more calm. I started to realize that I could have more control over myself and my reactions to whatever was happening.
So like on a scale of 0 to 10, because I only know like calm and cool collected Joni, like let's just say calm, cool, collected is like a 10, and let's say 0 is freak out, like wild and crazy, like just erratic. Like where were you at on that scale?
I was like a -5.
Oh, wow. Really? Oh, see, that's hard for me to imagine. But that's what happens with 20 years of growth,
yes,
right?
Absolutely. For sure. And
-5.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Man.
Bring my mother on the show and she'll tell you.
Do you think she would come on the show? Because I would love to do that podcast. That'd be a great podcast.
Yeah.
Where do you think that all came from? Like, have you like unpacked that to where like did you figure out like where the root of that was? Like that anger or whatever that was, it anger? It has to be anger, right? I feel
like I come from a long line of people who are really strong-willed and passionate, and sometimes that strong-willed, passionate personality turns into angst and anger when things don't go your way.
Control.
Yes, it's all about control.
And that just gets passed down through your environment and your genetics, maybe,
absolutely.
right?
I think so. And I think what I learned is that we're never going to have control over other people. We're never going to have control over certain aspects of our circumstances. But what we can do is learn to have control over ourselves. And that's the ultimate control.
You know all this stuff now, but back then, this was just like, it was kind of new, right?
Yeah.
What year did this happen where you like had that like epiphany moment? Like,
I want to say it was around the year 2000.
Okay.
And that was a couple years before I started a family. And so I know I wanted to change how I was before I had kids, because I didn't want to bring all this anxiety into a child's life.
But there wasn't like today, like I feel like it's almost like, yoga, mindfulness, all this stuff is like kind of cool now, right? But like 24 years ago, like 24 years ago, that's a long time.
Yeah.
I don't believe, the internet was still pretty fresh. It was definitely not as robust as it is now.
That's right.
So tell me how you just found like this side of life.
I had an acquaintance friend of mine say, "Hey, Joni, you seem really stressed. Yoga would help you." And I just thought, do I need yoga? What exactly is yoga? And I remember, I'll never forget my first yoga class. It was in the library of Seneca Valley School District High School. And it was just taught by this woman who was giving classes there on some weeknight. That was my first yoga class. But it was the first time in my life that I felt calm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's where it all started, and then it just continued after I had kids. I've always been kind of a health nut, so I learned more about nutrition, and then I didn't get my degree in psychology until a little bit later in life, in 2015.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So, like, what did you do did you still stay in that marketing and that business world for like a while?
I was in marketing for a while until I had kids. Then I stayed at home a few years with my kids. And then I was teaching yoga for a number of years, and then went back to school after I got divorced and got a master's in counseling psychology. And the interesting thing is that
I always think it's interesting too when therapists get divorced. But like you weren't a therapist then.
I wasn't a therapist. Yeah. I was a mindfulness and yoga teacher.
But I also know that like, because I know people listening, they're like, oh yeah, like how, like, if you can't figure out your own home life, like how can you teach other people, right? Like there's a lot of people that have that like stigma, right? But like you're just a human just like the rest of us.
That's right. And really,
I know that, but like most people don't.
I think what it's about is I got married very young. I was 21.
Oh, wow.
And so you don't know who you are at 21.
No,
you don't know who you are. And I just think that my husband and I didn't know who we were as individuals. And then as we grew into adulthood, we just kind of took separate paths. And so that's ultimately kind of what happened. And we had children, so like we stayed together for a while. But I think, I think my mindfulness helped me realize that this was not a good situation for either of us. And it's just, I knew myself and what I needed. And I believe that would be better for everyone. And I think ultimately it has been better for everyone. So.
Well, that's good that you have that, be able to reflect on that. I don't think most people are probably that aware when they go through something like it's turbulent as like a divorce or like a life situation. Yeah. And now you have enough time to look back on it and say like, yeah, okay, cool. Like good decisions. I'm sure he's doing good. You're doing good.
Yep.
Kids are doing good.
We're both
like
remarried. Yeah.
Everybody's thriving. Right. So that is so interesting. Like you say that, like, do you think that like, do you think everyone has a certain age, or do you think that like, how do you know when you know, like if you were advising, I just had a baby, little Evie Grace. Right. And I'm going to have to like deal with that. Right. Like, I'm going to try to say, hey, like, don't do anything crazy till you're 30. But like, that's not necessarily fair, right? Because like, how do you know when you know?
I think that it is a matter, it's totally the individual. I think some people never gain insight into who they are deep inside. I think that's really what it boils down to, is knowing yourself really well and understanding yourself enough to know what you're looking for. And, we all have our strengths and our growth edges. And whenever you're looking for another person, I think it's finding someone who has growth edges that you are willing to accept and grow with.
That's my new favorite term, by the way.
Growth edges.
Yeah, Brittany's been talking about growth edges a lot. I don't know if she gets that from you or from somebody else, but hear these growth, which is a very kind word for like the lines. right?
Well, the areas that we all need to grow in. It's better than saying our weaknesses.
It's the shit you need to work on.
Yeah. That's growth edge is a little softer. Ben.
How have you learned how to because the way that the language that you use is like really good. Like I always feel like, man, I wish I could talk more like Joni. Like it would help me in sales. It would help me in almost everything. If I could learn how to talk more like that. How long did it take you to change like the language that you used, right? Because growing up in Pittsburgh, growing up in stressful environments, I'm sure that like that just does, nobody teaches you that, right? Like
did not come naturally, no. But I do have an undergraduate degree in communication.
Okay,
so that's part of it. And I've always been a writer, and I've always written stories and poetry. And so I've always been attracted to words in terms of how to get your point across. But I think what makes me an effective communicator is mindfulness. And I know you're going to smile because I say that about everything. But mindfulness is really just awareness. And part of awareness is being able to be willing to take a pause before you say something. Often we have a feeling or we have a thought and we just open our mouth and whatever comes out, comes out. Mindfulness is really about taking that pause and considering, okay, how am I feeling right now? What's going on? What's my internal reaction to this circumstance? Now, what do I really want to communicate, and what's the most effective way to do that? You just have to be able
and you have to think about yourself and the other person.
For sure.
Right? Like it can't just be one-sided, right? Because you have to be kind of balance that out.
Yes, there's a whole part in my book about connection and communication. So really a quarter of the book is about communication.
Well, you've helped me with slowing that urge down because I always feel like there's this like thing that comes from the bottom of my like brain and it just shoots like all the way to the front of my forehead and it just like right out the tongue and it just splurts out like so fast.
Primitive brain.
Yeah, and I have not been able. I mean, I'm definitely taming that primitive brain better and better over the last few years. But I believe that there's and then there's the people that don't blurt anything out and they actually hold it all in. That's probably that's even scarier because you don't know actually what's going on in there, right?
Well, right. And that's basically the fight, flight, or freeze reaction, and those of us who are fighters have to pause because we're the ones who would blurt something out. People who would freeze or flee, the fight, flight, or freeze response. Those are the ones who they don't necessarily have to worry about blurting something out, but they have to stay and consider what they need to say instead of people who more have the fight response, have to hold back.
So very interesting. I'll never forget reading the Body Keeps the Score book. Man, I learned so much through that book about trauma and, both in children, from different things that can happen in families. And then also the Vietnam, more of acute trauma, that happens in a different type of situation, but they both have similar effects on the brain.
Oh, for sure.
And it's been very interesting, especially as I start to meet more people that have experienced either one of those severe things that have happened to them, whether it's, veterans or people that have had child traumas. And so it's man, you can really it's almost like you can empathize with them by reading that. Once you read that book, you can never unsee that ever again. I mean, it's a very gruesome book for most, I would say, even for me. And I was I thought I could handle it. And it was a tough book to read. And you've worked with that author before, haven't you?
I did a training.
Or you did a training with him?
Professional development.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool though.
Yeah. No, he's very knowledgeable in that area. And it's so important to understand. And yes, it helps you understand people a lot better. I don't think that we as a culture really accept the fact that our minds and our bodies are connected and have a huge impact on each other. So what happens in our bodies impacts our minds and emotions. It's all woven together. And I just think the average person doesn't recognize that enough. A lot of people, their body is just a mechanism to carry around their brain, their intelligence, so they can do one thing and then another, but they don't realize that it's all connected.
It's all connected. Cody, did you hear that? It's all connected. So tell me about another situation in your life. I know you had that situation when you were driving, you didn't like the way you were acting, and so you like did something about it. But that was 24 or 5 years ago. Tell me a story between now and then, like somewhere in the middle, that something else happened to you that you were able, like maybe like a personal vulnerability or a struggle that you've been able to transform in like a strength. Give me another example of how you did that in your personal life, and then how you help people with the therapy and how to be able to handle that.
Okay. So this is going to have a framework of something that I use whenever I work with people. And it's a piece of Buddhist psychology that I teach almost everyone I work with. I'm not sure if I talked with you about this or not. It's a piece of Buddhist psychology called the 5 Remembrances. So I'll tell you my personal story about this after I tell you what the 5 Remembrances are. So the 5 Remembrances are 5 facts about life. And so these are those 5 facts. The first one is, I'm of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. Second one is, I'm of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. The third one is, I'm of the nature to die. There's no way to escape death. The fourth one is, everyone I love is of the nature to change, and there's no way to escape being separated from them. So every time I tell someone these, I haven't gotten to the 5th one yet, but every time I tell someone these, people are like, thanks, Joni. I thought you were supposed to be a positive person. You just told me, you just reminded me that I'm going to grow old, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to die, I'm going to lose people I love. But the 5th remembrance is, my actions are my only true belongings. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. So that's always been a powerful piece of philosophy for me. And I've always thought about and considered each of those and which one is most difficult for me to digest as 5 facts of being human. Which, by the way, that piece of Buddhist psychology is basically saying the same thing as the serenity prayer. So the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
So the same courage, 5 points are in there.
Courage, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So serenity to accept the things I cannot change, like I'm going to grow old, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to die, I'm going to lose people I love. Courage to change the things I can, that's me, I can change myself. And the wisdom to know the difference. Now, the serenity prayer is much more widely known, and it's also more gentle than the 5 remembrances. But, so I'll tell you, I've always read through those 5 remembrances and thought, well, I'm going to skip the ill health thing, because I'm a health nut. Like, I've always eaten healthy and exercised, and I meditate and I do all the right things. So I'm going to be healthy always. And then in 2017, I was giving a talk actually, and I started to have chest pains. And I thought, I was just getting over a cold, and I thought maybe I have bronchitis. Maybe it's gone into my chest. And so I went to like urgent care right after my talk I was giving. And the urgent care doctor, I can't do the math right now, I was in my early 40s. And he said, you know what, you could be having a heart attack. We can't deal with you here. You have to go to the ER. And I said, I'm not having a heart attack. I have perfect cholesterol and I have low blood pressure. And so I went home. Well, I decided to go. My boyfriend at the time said, well, maybe we should just go to the ER just in case. So we went to the ER, had a blood test done, and it ends up I had an elevated heart enzyme that could be indicative of a heart attack. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there saying, there's no way. I was very resistant to the idea. Long story short, I spent the weekend in Passivant Hospital with them doing complete cardiac workup on me. They found out that I had myocarditis. So I didn't have a heart attack, but I did have myocarditis is an inflammation of the sac that your heart is in. And you can get myocarditis from a lot of different things. And I might have just gotten it from a cold. But the fact of the matter was, as they were going through all this testing and trying to figure out what was wrong with me, I remember being hysterical in the hospital and crying to my boyfriend at the time and saying, this can't be right. This can't be right. And then all of a sudden, the 5 remembrances popped into my head. And all of a sudden I stopped crying and I said to myself, wow, I am of the nature to have ill health. And literally just like that, I said, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to have to deal with whatever my reality is. And, thankfully, myocarditis is an infection that passes. And so, I'm healthy now and haven't had an issue
But you're
with
not as
that
cocky
again.
about it anymore,
Yes.
right? Like you have like a different spirit about it.
And I think some of that cockiness must have returned because I'm being reminded of that again. I have a torn labrum in my hip.
Okay.
And I found out I
Too much yoga?
No, it's a defect I was born with. I have hip dysplasia, and I'm gonna need hip replacement in the next year.
Wait, what? Not you.
I'm not even 50 years old
No, you're
yet.
not.
I'm gonna need a hip replacement. So,
Joni
but that
yoga,
is,
Joni that bends like in all these different ways.
I know.
What is
That is,
people that
I am of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape ill health.
Do the people that do yoga, like I'm sure that you probably work with, like now you're going to be like thinking like, I got to go hang out with the 70-year-olds that have hip replacements, right? And then like do like gentle yoga.
No, I'm gonna be able to do everything that I want to do.
Well, I know you're going to be determined to like figure out how to like even bend more probably somehow.
I'll be fine.
Do you get a special yoga hip? Can you ask the doctor for like a?
I am asking for like if they can give me some kind of a bionic hip. Like that would be great. Yeah.
I'm not laughing at that, but I'm glad that you have a good sense of humor about it because you're right. Like, I mean, it happens all the time, like I saw a guy in the grocery store the other day that was probably 600 pounds. He was 80 years old. I'm like, it's just a pure anomaly because you don't really see that many people that are that large that are that old, and I'm like, all right. But then you hear about stories like, the healthiest people just drop it over. And it's like, is there actually rhyme or reason for any of this?
Well, that's why I think the 5 remembrances are so powerful because it does keep you humble. It's like, I do everything that I can. My actions are my only true belongings, but that still can't prevent every little thing from going wrong. Still going to experience those 4.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. That's
Absolutely.
Good. I do have, because I know a lot of people are so interested because like therapy has like such like a, I don't know. It's like very like black and white to a lot of people, right? Like either like a lot of people either like love it and they like live and die by it. The other ones are like, yeah, that stuff's weird and like it doesn't work and like it's weird. So what's like a significant like misconception about therapy that you've encountered and how did like a real, like, is there like a real client story? Obviously I don't want any names, but like defy that belief, like where like you were able to like, they had this misconception. I'm sure people come to you, they're probably like a little bit nervous, they're a little bit weird, but like.
So I am definitely a non-traditional therapist, and there's all different kinds of therapists, right? I consider myself more of a coaching kind of therapist. I personally don't like going to the kind of therapist who just sits and says, how did that make you feel? But doesn't ever help you think things through, help you guide you in any kind of direction or give you any tools or practices. So I do those things, offer tools and practices and offer guidance a little bit more than some therapists. But I would say when I first started my counseling practice, I mostly worked with all women. And that's definitely shifted over the years. And I'm surprised, statistically, men are less likely to reach out and get mental health support. And I know in my practice, again, I started off just seeing only women, and now I definitely have more male clients. And they're usually hesitant the first session that they have with me. And I usually even talk to them on the phone before a first session so that they have an idea of what I'm going to be like. And actually, several of my male clients just refer to me kind of as their coach.
Yeah.
Like their mind coach or their mental and emotional coach.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to be thought of in that regard because that's what I feel like I'm trying to do. Like we all need help in that regard. Just like if we would, you want to get in shape, you go to the gym, you get a personal trainer. Like you feel like you're stressed and you're not quite sure how to manage things that are happening in life. Like go to a mental emotional coach. So that's
and
kind
for
of how
me,
I
you're like
myself.
my relationship coach because like you've taught me how to really lean into my relationships and to be able to get even more out of them. and to actually like feel like I'm winning a little bit more. Because for the longest period of time, I feel like I was really good at relationships on one side, but then I could also self-sabotage them and burn them to the ground. And so that's been very helpful. And I feel like, yeah, everyone I refer to is probably guys, probably because I hang out with mostly male entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, well, we'll keep sending them your way. And we're going to change the world that way. One client at a time.
Absolutely.
Is there any like story about a client's transformation that you've seen like over the last 25 years? Obviously, I don't want any names. Whose journey was particularly memorable or like really surprising, even surprised you? Because I'm sure like you get people come in, they tell you their story, or I'm assuming you go home and you're like, holy crap, like that was like, I thought I seen it all, and then I saw this, right? Like you have to, because you're a human, and I'm just gonna call it out because that's what that's what the rest of us millions are like thinking right now. So like what story for you is like that you've seen like such a big shift?
So I can actually think of, and again, without giving any kind of identifying details, I can think of a couple of clients that I've had, not just one, but a couple who have kind of followed this pattern of they come and see me, and they come and see me with the intention of wanting to learn how to manage their stress better, because they recognize that they are just really stressed out and not managing it well.
They're like Joni on the Parkway.
Yes, exactly. That's right. They're like me on the Parkway at 22.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I work with them, and one of the things that I do when I work with someone is I give them homework, right? Everybody always has homework, something that they have to work on. That's the point of therapy. I don't want people to see me forever. I want people to get tools so that they can help themselves. That's right. And so they don't have to work with me forever. But I've had, a few clients who just never did their homework, and they weren't making any change. And, sometimes a client like that, they would just stop seeing me after a certain point. I know at least one client, after I work with them for a period of time, maybe a year, and they were not experiencing, nothing's getting better for them, I'll actually refer them out to someone else, because I'll say, I don't feel like I'm being effective for you, and I want you to get better. So if I'm not the right person for you, I want to send you to someone else. But I can think of at least 2 or 3 clients who, if that has happened, that's happened, but then they've ended up coming back to me years later, sometimes months later, sometimes years later. I know one client came back to me after having a stroke.
So now I want to know, like, if there's ever been like a particular moment in the middle like of a session that's left a deep impact on you and shaped either how you live your life or how you maybe approach therapy like differently.
So I would say that happens all the time. I would say that happens on a weekly basis. In fact, I'll sometimes share with my clients that for whatever reason, I often find that there are emerging themes that are similar that all of my clients are experiencing in a given week. And so that's impactful for me because how I respond to their struggles, it's funny, but it's often the message that I myself need to hear. So something that I'm saying to someone else to help them through maybe a really grief-filled time or a really frustrating experience, whatever kind of homework assignment I give to them or whatever I coach them in, I'll hear the words come out of my own mouth and I'll say, wow, Joni, you really need to follow that yourself. And to me, I feel like whenever I'm in session with someone, I feel like I'm really just a conduit, and I don't want to sound too esoteric whenever I say I feel like I'm being guided on how to help someone move in the right direction. But again, I feel like there are always themes that emerge because we're all human beings. Like you said, we all experience similar struggles and similar positive things that happen in terms of how we feel, emotions. We experience similar emotions as human beings. And whenever those themes emerge, it's often whatever my clients are struggling with in a particular week. Sometimes I'm struggling with the same thing. And so it's helpful for me to hear the right thing come out of my own mouth.
Do therapists see therapists?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Is it more about your personal life, or like you having to like deal with, when I say deal, that sounds terrible. The work that you do can be very intense, I'm sure. So you have that, then you have your own life that can be very intense. Is it just all of that to like the therapist, like at the next level, like,
Yes.
like just kind of just pouring it all out there and be like, man, like I'm dealing with this client's thing. I got like this own thing happened in my life.
Yes.
Like, what's that like behind the scenes?
Absolutely. So, I mean, well, yeah, therapists are human beings. And so we have crazy stuff that happens in our life. So there's certain times we need to go to therapy for our own personal reasons. But groups of therapists will often get together, and because we're all held under confidentiality, we can share struggles that we're having with certain clients. And of course, we don't, share identifying information, but we're able to share and get each other's support around working with certain clients, because sometimes, multiple minds are better than just one.
Because you get the insight, right? Of
Absolutely.
their 30, 40 clients or hundreds
sure.
that they've worked with. So did you ever watch Sopranos?
I did not know.
Oh, you never watched Sopranos. I can't go down that rabbit hole. I wouldn't even tell you that you should watch Sopranos because there's a therapist in Sopranos that works with Tony Soprano, who's this gangster Italian mobster who's the star of the show. And he sees a therapist. And then the therapist also has her group of therapists.
Yes.
That then she talks because she doesn't know how to handle this mob boss and but the problem is she can't also even say anything without giving away identifying things. Like she tries to keep it a secret, but they all figure out that she's working with Tony Soprano because there's only one Tony Soprano. It was just purely obvious. So it's just interesting. If I always was going to ask you, if TV depicts that, how it actually is in real life, but maybe you and your husband, I see if your husband ever watched that. Cause I feel like it's more of a guy show probably back in the day. That came out in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And it was really cool. But anyway, let's talk about some best practices and actual insights. This is your website's, Insight with Joni. Mm-hmm. I've hired you to come and do talks, either workshops that I've put on, stuff with my team here at Big Fish. I feel like we've done, a few events together, and you always everyone that always walks away for whatever reason. And I could have some really killer speakers, some really killer sales training and marketing training, whatever. They always tell me the Joni stuff's their favorite. And so I feel like we need to help the audience. And I know they're probably either driving or listening to this, and, they probably won't be able to pull over on the road and take any breaths. So maybe be mindful of that. But I have some questions here. How do mindfulness and meditation uniquely contribute to healing, especially for those dealing with trauma? Because a lot of people are on the fence about should I do that?
Mm-hmm. So mindfulness and the kind of mindfulness that I teach is they're very simple practices, but simple doesn't mean easy. So by simple, the kind of practices that I teach are really just about awareness and paying attention. And that's hard for us because we live in a distracted state. Most of the time. And our culture is one of constant distraction, whether it's from technology, our phones, social media, watching movies.
Crazy family members.
So we don't allow for a lot of time for insight. Insight only comes when we can take a pause and we can look inside. And the things that I recommend you looking at inside, there's a simple little mindfulness practice called internal awareness. And you look at 4 things inside. You just stop and you close your eyes and you pay attention to how your body feels. Because our body gives us information, when we have a lot of tension in our neck and shoulders, obviously that tells us that we're stressed, right? Sometimes when people are nervous or anxious, or they meet someone that they're not quite sure how they feel about, you'll get an upset stomach. So again, to be able to observe and notice what's going on in our body and understand that your body is giving you information, if you slow down enough to pay attention to it and look at it and listen to it. The second thing to pay attention to is our energy level. And what I mean by that is how tired you are and how awake you are. Because we're going to function differently and we're going to have different abilities if we're exhausted and we're functioning on 2 hours of sleep, or if we've had 8 hours of sleep and we feel great. right? We're going to have different degrees of functioning. So if we pay attention to that and we recognize that in ourselves, we can be more skillful in the choices that we make in any given day. The third thing you can pay attention to is checking in with your mood and emotions. Often we don't pay attention to our mood and emotions until we're ready to explode. Something big happens. We have a big emotion. But if you can just do a little check-in and just say to yourself, okay, how do I feel right now? What emotion is present? And what emotion is just beneath the surface? Because sometimes our surface emotion is like, I'm good. But underneath that, we can sense a little bit of irritation or a little bit of sadness. If we can just learn to see that and know that, again, that understanding is going to help you make more skillful choices in conversations that you have and actions that you take. And then the fourth thing to pay attention to is to try and learn how to separate yourself from your thoughts. We're often so entangled with our thoughts that we think our thoughts are who we are. But our thoughts are just things bouncing around inside our head that are a result of past events or future worries. And if we can just take a look at what are the contents of my thoughts, or are they about the past? Are they about the future? Can I just pause for a moment and just notice what my thoughts are about or how fast my thoughts are? And then, of course, you can always take a few deep breaths, and that can help you reset your nervous system and kind of reset before you take any actions.
So let's talk about the breath thing, because I know breath is a big part of like the work that you do. And I've learned a lot from Brittany as well, because she's into the whole yoga, mindfulness, and breath work. And I've been to some, even like when I went to a Tony Robbins event, trying to like be a better business person. Like, dude, here was breath work. Like there was a lot of breath work. Almost anything that I've ever been to that's been impactful has had some type of breathing exercise with it. And so like now I've just realized that like, yeah, I'm still a little stubborn though. So like sometimes I still fight it because I'm like, it can't be that simple. But like you said, like it's simple, but it's hard to train yourself a new habit. So give me like a really quick breath work exercise that people can do when, something starts to like, when they notice themselves starting to like, be not okay.
And so in my opinion, the most effective breathing technique is 4-8 breathing. So this is where you're taking really long, slow, deep breaths, diaphragmatic breathing. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But diaphragmatic breathing basically means you need to relax your belly when you breathe. A lot of us have tension there, and we're not breathing as deeply as we could be. But those 4-8 numbers, 4-8 breathing, refer to the length of your inhale and the length of your exhale. So when you take a deep breath in, you count to 4 in your head, and that's a really full deep breath. You're filling your tank, so to speak. And then you exhale to a count of 8. So when your exhale is twice as slow as your inhale, it has a pretty quick physiological response in the body. Your heart rate lowers, your blood pressure lowers. It gets your nervous system out of that fight or flight state and into a state of, into your rest and digest state. So into a state of relaxation, your parasympathetic nervous system. All you have to do is breathe that way for 2 minutes and your body will start to shift. So inhale to a count of 4, really deep breath in. Exhale to a count of 8, emptying your lungs, and just continuing that for 2 minutes.
Really? Mm-hmm. I mean, you've done that with me almost every single time, especially when we have group events, because I feel like that's like people's favorite thing to do, because it is simple. It is simple,
and the hardest thing about it, the hardest thing about it is just remembering to do it. Like you said, it's just remembering this is a tool. This is a tool that I have that will help me be more effective. It will help me get out of a state of stress and get into a place where I'm focused, I'm calm, and I'm ready to move forward.
I got an idea for you. And I'm sure like you didn't invent 4-8 breathing, right?
Correct.
We should find out who did and give them credit. But at the end of the day, I think you need like those bracelets and then just put 4-8 Joni. and then people could always remember. And like stickers, right? Like I got like these, these big fish stickers, from like podcasts. Like you should get like a 4-8 something, 4-8. So then that way people can just remember. Like put it in their car, on their windshield.
Absolutely.
Put it on their mirror, put it on their, like a bracelet on their wrist. Because I believe that is a secret. I mean.
So that is a great marketing idea. I really like that. And my thing is always, because people have Apple Watches, they have technology that reminds them to breathe, things like that. And while that might be great to use as a tool when you're getting started, when changes really take place in your brain and in your nervous system is when you learn to recognize on your own without any outside prompting, I need to stop and breathe. So you really want to learn to do that on your own and not have to be reminded by a bracelet or an Apple Watch.
Yeah, but for like 90 days, though, for the stubborn people out there, we might need it, and then we could have a burning ceremony where we light it on fire because we don't need it anymore. Or we pass it to somebody else, which is even a better idea.
Passing it to someone else.
This is not forever. This is just, temporary. Then you're supposed to give this to somebody else once you've mastered the ability to always remember to breathe for it. There you go. See?
Works. I like
just got to sit on it for a little bit.
Okay.
What emotional intelligence? I know we talked a little bit about that earlier. Why is it so important in overcoming personal challenges, and how can one begin to cultivate emotional intelligence?
So emotional intelligence is key. In fact, most employers say nowadays that that's the number one thing that they're looking for in people when they hire people.
Oh, yeah.
So this next generation, which oddly is not the strongest in emotional intelligence, that is the best thing that they can learn to increase. And emotional intelligence really has to do with self-awareness. So guess what? That's mindfulness. Self-control, that's also mindfulness. Having effective social skills, that's communication, and being able to make effective decisions. And that's also stems from mindfulness. So that's really important because emotional intelligence helps us to, once again, understand ourselves better so that we can see our reactions to things and then internalize all that so that we can understand what the best way to communicate a response is. And we can also use emotional intelligence to look at someone else and understand what their perspective might be, have that awareness and understanding so that, again, we can be better communicators. We can help people feel seen, heard, and understood. And ultimately, we're more likely to get what we want if we are skillful in the way that we, again, have self-awareness, self-control, and communicate to others.
Well, do you have a favorite book on emotional intelligence, or like a favorite way to get somebody started on that?
That's a good question. I don't have a book off the top of my head. I do have, other than my book that's coming out.
Do you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. It's really about the space to choose is really about emotional intelligence and resilience.
Oh, well, there we go. So it sounds good. That's the book.
Yeah, that is really a huge part of what the book is. And it talks about how to cultivate emotional intelligence because it is a multi-step process. And the book has 4 components. Mindfulness is the first section. Then self-discovery. So learning about yourself, understanding yourself better. Self-care, going through all the different ways you can care for yourself and then in turn care for others. And then the final section is connection and communication. So those 4 things together really do help you to cultivate emotional intelligence.
Why did you write that book?
The book is something that I've been working on for a couple of years that really just culminates all of my education and experience and knowledge into one source. So anyone who reads the book, someone who's worked with me in the past would read the book and say, wow, yeah, this sounds like Joni. This sounds like a talk by Joni, or this sounds like therapy with Joni. So it's really just a guidebook to be more skillful in life, or the subtitle is, a path to life mastery. Because I feel like so many people these days are feeling stressed, depressed, overwhelmed, lost. and don't know where to turn or don't know how to get on a path where they feel better about themselves and better about life. And so that's part of my motivation for writing the book.
So I want to know that, like, so when you say a path to like life mastery, like you said you're what, 50, right?
I'm turning 50 this year.
Yeah, you're turning 50 this year. So you're still pretty young. You still have, 20, 30, 40 years left, God willing. Since it's a path to life mastery, like, are there going to be updates? Are you going to write a new book? Like, because you're consistently be learning new things, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I think that this book will definitely have additional editions in the future. I can already think of a couple things that I might add in a future edition.
Like what?
Just expanding on those 4 categories, basically, a little bit more. So the updated edition might just include more tools or maybe some more anecdotes. I share a lot of anecdotes and little stories in the book because I feel like I always learn best.
Are they about your stories or like client stories or a mixture of both?
No client stories in the book, I don't think. Maybe, no, I don't think there's any client stories. Couple personal stories, but anecdotes that come from different traditions.
Okay.
So little historical stories. The title of the book, The Space to Choose, is actually based on a quote by Viktor Frankl. Do you know who Viktor Frankl is?
Yeah, he's the guy, the Holocaust guy that wrote Man's Search for Meaning, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's a really good book.
Yeah, he was a psychologist and survived a Nazi prison camp. And his quote, and it's my favorite quote, is, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom." So between stimulus and response, between what happens to us, between the circumstances that are in front of us, and how we respond to them, there's a space. We don't often experience the space because we're so knee-jerk reactive. But there is a space there if you learn to find it and see it. And then we can choose how we want to respond to our circumstances. And that is the only thing we really have control over in life. And then if we do that, we do feel more freedom, and we do feel like we're more in control of ourselves and therefore more in control of our life.
Isn't it like kind of like ironic that it's always, I call them the God pauses. Like for Victor, it was probably like, hey, he was in a Nazi prison camp and he was like, there's nothing else to do but think about and have like, hold space for yourself, right? And try to figure this out. And like for me in my own life, like there's been moments, whether it was like when I had my overdose and I was like sitting there in the ICU, and then even like a couple weeks later, like, I was super paused. I think COVID was another pause moment for like a lot of us, but it always seems like the 2x4, right? Like the 2x4 has to come to pause us. But like, I feel like when that happens, when we share those stories, it's hopefully so someone doesn't have to experience the 2x4. Right. To like just be able to like then do the meditation, right? To pause or whatever practice they want to use to be able to like have some type of like silence. I find that so interesting. It's like a catch-22 kind of. It's like you almost need the 2x4 experience if you can't figure out how to do it on your own. For sure.
Sometimes, it's like sometimes God or the universe like kind of knocks gently to kind of knocks at our door metaphorically to say, okay, you need to move in this direction. But if we're not paying attention and we don't hear the knock, it comes like a pounding on the door. And then if we still don't pay attention to the pounding at the door, that is when we get the cosmic 2x4 to the head. And it's just, I think sometimes we need that cosmic 2x4 to the head to start us on, let's say, a path to life mastery. But then hopefully after that, you don't need a second 2x4 to the head. Hopefully after that, we pay attention to the little whisperings that guide us in the right direction. And the little whisperings, our own instinct, our own intuition, our own inner knowing. We know what's right for us, I think, deep down inside. We just don't always pay attention to that little inner voice.
Yeah, that's true. I believe that we're all good and like we're all very good, perfect human beings at the core.
Me too.
But we just don't always, we don't peel all that back to like really see that and then act like that. Right.
That's right. We all make poor decisions sometimes, or we all react from a place of emotionality.
Because our environment's taught us that, like, or like what we've seen with our eyes,
For
what we
sure.
like, what's been, Yeah, that's
modeled for us. Yeah.
You said something interesting, and I hear people say this all the time, and I don't know if people are trying to be politically correct or why, but they say God or the universe. Tell me more about like why you say it like that. God or the universe. Do you believe they're the same, the different? Give me your rant on that.
I think I say that just to be inclusive of everyone's beliefs, because I think everyone believes something different. Some people believe in God, some people believe in the universe, some people don't believe in anything, which I always hope that those people find a way to believe in something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I just say that to try and be inclusive of everyone's beliefs.
What do you believe in?
I believe in God. I don't know that it's, I guess it's my own version of things. You know, I was raised in I call it a casually Christian household.
That's funny. That's not casually Christian. What's the definition of casually? Easter and Christmas?
Well, I guess so. And I guess
my pastor used to say, "Oh, look, the Easter bunnies came out," because the church would be packed.
I know, right?
And they'd be like, "Look at all the Easter bunnies," and he would actually call them out. And I'm like, "Dude, that's so awful! Like, don't say that. They're not going to come back. Like, if you really want them to come back, don't make fun of them."
Well, and also what I mean by casually is, so I grew up with my stepdad, who is really like my dad, and he traveled the world, and he was exposed to a lot of different cultures and a lot of different religions. And actually, when I grew up as a teenager, our talks around the dinner table were all about spirituality and religion and what different people believe. And we would never say, well, this person is right and this person is wrong. We would just have conversations about all these different spiritual traditions and say, isn't that interesting? What do you think? What do you think today? You know, does your opinion change the next day? And so I honestly kind of like to entertain an amalgamation of all the different things that I've learned. So I kind of believe that a lot of different things are probably true. And so whenever I say God or the universe, it's kind of an amalgamation that it's hard for me to put into words. But that's very interesting. It's everything that I've learned, and I don't not believe.
Yeah. That's wild. Because you referenced the Buddha, and I feel like yoga and that came from the Eastern culture, and then there's the Christian with Jesus.
So one thing people don't understand about studying Buddhism is Buddhism is not so much, it's classified as a religion, but it's not really a religion. It's more of I always say Buddhist psychology, because
it's like a philosophy.
It is more of a philosophy on how to live life. Never, ever, ever in any reading have I ever read, you should believe this, or they don't think of the Buddha as God. The Buddha was just a guy who came up with a model of living, and they say he reached enlightenment because he found a way of living that was skillful and lessened suffering. And so it's just kind of here's this idea, or here's this guy who came up with this model of living to reduce your level of suffering. See how it works for you.
Do you think that Jesus is that model in the Christian
absolutely
sect? So
absolutely.
And do you believe that there are just different versions of that, and they're probably all I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but explain that to me.
Absolutely. I think Jesus is definitely that. And I think that there are some people who believe that, so in Buddhism, they do believe in reincarnation, so that our soul kind of gets recycled and we live different lives. And there are a lot of people.
That's taboo in the Christian faith, right?
Well, the interesting thing, I've heard some people who, again, have an amalgamation faith, I'll say, which is kind of what I have. There are some people who say that they think that Jesus was probably the Buddha reincarnated, because he teaches things that the Buddha teaches, to love people, to care for people, to be kind.
I've read again, I think I read the Tao, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And there was nothing in there because I tried to read it and be very, I grew up in a very strict Christian Baptist home. I'm very thankful for that, because it really indoctrinated me in some good values.
Absolutely.
But I am also trying to learn about, so I can try to connect with other humans. So that way, I don't know, I can just be a good light, right? And if they want to ask more questions, they can ask more questions, but if they don't, then they don't have to. But I do find it interesting when I read that, I tried to poke holes in it.
Yeah.
Just like people try to poke holes in the Bible, probably.
Right.
And I couldn't find anything that was like,
Yeah, because the Tao is also just kind of suggesting how to live.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, they're
really,
like just like it's almost like just good old. Yeah, like good principles that anybody should like want to live by.
Right. The Dalai Lama is quoted by saying, I think it was the Dalai Lama, who said, you don't have to be Buddhist, like be Christian, but learn Buddhism to be a better Christian. Like,
yeah, I mean, I like that. I mean, that's why I feel like on my journey, I have been trying to use the best of everything. Because again, if you do truly believe in God and that he created everything, then he created Buddha, he created like all the philosophers. And so there's got to be some
truth in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everyone's trying to unpack that. I have so many different guests on the show and they all have different, little views on things. And, I'm pretty strong in my belief. But I don't try to impose it on anybody. I just try to like share that, whenever the time comes. But I just always find it interesting. I'm like, cause there's like all this like new age stuff, right? Like I hear that word new age and I'm like, is it just like, what is that? What is that new age? What does that mean to you?
I don't know what that means.
You've heard of that though, right?
I have. Something I was going to say that relates to what you were just saying is, and I don't know this quote in its entirely, and I don't know who said it.
We won't hold you to it.
But there's a quote that said something in terms of religion and spirituality that God dropped a piece of glass or mirror on the earth and it broke into pieces and everyone picked up a piece and thought that they had the truth, but everyone had a piece of the truth. So that always resonated with me, and that probably resonated with me because again, I've studied so many different kinds of spirituality, life philosophies, religions, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That it shattered and everyone picked up a piece and thought that that was the truth, but it's really a little bit of everything.
We're going to shift gears now because we want to get to this one topic that's, I feel like it's kind of a hot button topic about AI and artificial intelligence.
I've been waiting.
I know you've been waiting. You've been over there patient as a panda. And so I remember we had a conversation like a year ago. And I was trying to tell you how I was using AI to help me come up with the right words, because sometimes I struggle to because as I work on my own emotional intelligence, I'm trying to be more mindful of my word choice, right? And I learned that this computer algorithm program, if I tell it to give me different ways to say what I'm trying to say, and then I'll say give me 10, I'll just say it. If Brittany says something to me that kind of triggers me, I will literally go in and say, my wife just said this to me. Hold on. Let's work. Just before we judge. My wife just said this to me. How do I respond? This is the intent that I'm trying to get across. How do I respond in a way that's loving, kind, compassionate? It'll give me 10 different ways. I look at all of them. It's almost like my Joni bot when I don't have Joni available all the time. And so I remember telling you this, and I remember you having that, Ben, that whole mom mode. We're don't do it. And so I don't know. And I know that, and then I found out that your husband is big into AI and really into it. And I found that so interesting because I didn't know that when I had that conversation with you, because I wish I would have, because I would have been well, what would he have said?
Yes.
And so what is this like? Because now you're married to someone that's into AI, into the future, I'm assuming, into using it as a tool. So, you're this awesome holistic therapist, creature. Just give me all your thoughts on all this.
So here's the story. So my husband, Brian Stamford, he teaches innovative learning practices to teachers in Allegheny County. He works for the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. And he's really big into AI, and he's doing a lot of professional development trainings for AI. He's really excited about technology. He drives a Tesla. He has every new gadget that you can possibly think of.
Did he get the Apple Pro Vision goggles yet?
Not yet,
but I got
he's
those.
Looking at them.
Well, if he wants to borrow mine, I'll let him borrow it for a week. It's really cool.
Okay, so when he first told me about ChatGPT and all these technologies, I got really worked up over the dinner table, and we had this really heated discussion. He said, "Hey, Joni, I didn't invent this. But you do have to realize that this technology is here to stay, and we have to find a way to deal with it. Well, we ended up having further conversations, and we ended up have subsequently done several conferences together. We do a presentation together called Tending to Our Humanity in the Age of AI. And we're actually doing a conference in Innsbruck, Austria this summer.
Really?
We're talking
That's
at the
cool.
European Conference on Positive Psychology.
Good for you.
But here's why we need to be cautious about that. First of all, yes, technology has many benefits, ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence tools. There's definitely benefits to them, but here's why we need to be cautious around them. So number one, having AI write content for you. We need to be cautious with that because our ability to write is part of our ability to think critically. It's how we process things often. So think about if you write a proposal or even just draft an email. If you're not using ChatGPT, what happens? You draft something, then you read it and you think to yourself, is this really what I want to communicate? And then if it's not, then you edit it and you change it. Well, all of that is part of a process that human beings have of critically thinking. You might not realize it yet, but the more you depend on artificial intelligence to particularly write entire sets of content for you, over time you're going to lose that ability to think critically. And there's errors that are likely to happen. One of the stories my husband tells at the conference is he used ChatGPT to write a proposal for him, and he submitted the proposal. He read it over and like, oh, that sounds good. He submitted the proposal. Well, they emailed him back and said, oh yeah, we want you to do this for us. But how do you plan to do these 3 things in just 1 hour? And he read it. And his first thought was, I didn't say I was going to do that. He didn't say he was going to do that, but ChatGPT said he was going to do that. And he just missed it in his editing.
Because he didn't reread it.
Well, he did reread it,
yeah, but he didn't catch it.
He didn't catch it.
Gotcha.
So there's risk for errors. There's also
but isn't there risk for errors without it too?
Well, for sure. But going back to the critical thinking thing, it's almost like, so, we go to the gym and we lift a weight and we get a stronger bicep, right? Let's say we get a really strong bicep because we're lifting weights. Mm-hmm. Then we stop lifting weights. And slowly that bicep muscle is going to get weaker and weaker again. The same is true for skills that we have, like writing and critically thinking and having to think through something like an email or a proposal and write it. It's okay to use ChatGPT for ideas, but you don't want to use it for entire sets of content. The other reason you don't want to use it is because it is just pulling. So first of all, we've been talking today about how we're all kind of flawed human beings, right? Well, ChatGPT is pulling from content that was created by flawed human beings. So often it pulls content from people who have written things on the internet that is often very biased or factually incorrect. Mm-hmm. So it's pulling information that is not necessarily quality information that you want.
Factually incorrect by whose standard, though?
Well, it depends on where it's pulling information
it's one thing if
from.
it's 2 + 2 = 4 versus 5, but like when there's an idea or like a position that like that's who's the actual judge that says like,
well,
hey, that's right.
That's true. But I guess when I'm talking about information about people,
it's still
or
very early too, just so you know, and
yeah.
the whole like thing. So as you do realize, I'm sure he's told you this.
It's learning.
It will get better, and as people upvote correctness versus downvote like not correctness, eventually like it just keeps binarily like getting better.
Well, so I told you before we were online here to watch the documentary The AI Dilemma. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
It was created by the same guys who did the Social Dilemma, if you saw that. In the AI Dilemma, they talk about how there's certain kinds of self-learning AI models that are actually have started to teach themselves, and the creators don't know how the AI is learning, but it is learning on its own. In particular, some model of AI had taught itself nuclear grade chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I believe it.
It wasn't programmed to to do that, but it taught itself by information that's out there available online on the internet. So there's just, I just am part of the group of people who want to slow down the exponential growth of artificial intelligence for a multitude of reasons.
Give me a couple of those reasons. I'm curious.
One is because if you use it to write for you all the time, you're going to lose critical thinking ability.
Do you really believe that? How do you know that?
The example I just gave you,
but how do you know
writing
that?
is
How do
part
you-
of literacy.
Sure,
and
but how do you-
literacy is part of critical thinking.
Okay, but how
And
do you
so
how
if
do you
we
know
don't
that?
write anymore, we are losing the avenue that we have for critical thinking. One of the avenues that we have for critical thinking.
Yeah, that's just one of the avenues. But like at the end of the day, I inherently believe that humans have innate ability to always critically think, regardless of the technology that's around, what's available to them, even back to the caveman. I mean, the caveman didn't necessarily write.
Well, I think we're going to send ourselves back to caveman days if we continue to.
So that's what I want to hear, the fears. So like, what else?
It's not. Well, I mean, it is fear.
Yeah,
You're right. It is
it's
fear.
okay. I don't
But
mean, fear is supposed to guide us a little bit, right?
it is supposed to guide us a little bit, and I'm certainly not the only one who has some grounded logical concerns.
Sure. Oh no,
about
I
it,
see.
for
I
sure.
see. Just so everyone's out there that knows, like I see both sides. I'm literally just wanting to hear both sides.
So the other thing, one of the other things that we talk about in our presentation, my husband and I, and we playfully tease about this because he has an Apple Watch, an Oura ring. Do you know what an Oura ring is?
No, but I think I do. It's like it can sense like different.
Tracks your sleep and all that sort of
Yeah.
health data. And, one of the kind of jokes we make in our presentation is, we wake up in the morning and he says to me, "How did you sleep?" And I say, "I didn't sleep too well. I feel a little tired this morning." I ask him, "How did you sleep?" And he says, "Hang on, let me check my phone."
Yeah, Siri. Yeah.
So, I mean, like that's a joke, but it's it's not a joke. So here's the thing.
But here, let me give you the equivalent to that.
No, let me finish.
All right,
then.
go ahead.
So here's why there's a caution around that. While it might be good to sometimes get supporting data around things like sleep or wellness or to tell you to take a deep breath, there are people who entirely lose the ability to be self-aware of whether they legitimately had a good night's sleep or not. And again, my husband and I joke about it, but there are people who would have to look at their phone because they can't perceive themselves. Did I have a good night's sleep or not? If you have your Apple Watch buzzing you when your heart rate increases and telling you to take a deep breath, I want you to be able to recognize. That's what mindfulness is. We go back to emotional intelligence. You have to be able to recognize on your own without external prompting. I'm stressed. I need to take a deep breath right now. And if we turn over our own self-control, our own to some external device, depending on an external device to remind us to do everything, to breathe, to exercise, to tell us how we've slept, we are losing self-awareness and self-control if we overly depend on those devices.
But I believe that, I've been watching the world the way it is without those devices, and it doesn't seem like it's that much more pleasant. So like at the end of the day, I can make the argument that if that helps people regulate more, like why is that bad? Because the crazy world got them into this place to begin with.
So I'm not suggesting that you never use them. I'm suggesting that they need.
You're worried about dependency.
Yes, I'm worried about dependency because as
You're
human
dependent
beings,
you're dependent on your vehicle to get you to and from places.
That's a little bit different.
Tell me why.
Because that doesn't have any impact on my self-awareness or self-efficacy. Whereas being told to breathe because I'm stressed, I need to have something external to me tell me to breathe because I'm stressed. It's because I'm not aware that I'm stressed. That doesn't have to, it's not a functional thing. It's a self-awareness, self-control, wellness thing. We need to be able to pay attention to that on our own. If you need an Apple Watch or something like that to help you get started with awareness, I think that's fine. But I think that you need to wean yourself off of the overutilization of those kinds of devices to tell you when to sleep, to tell you when to breathe, to tell you when to exercise, because the definition of self-awareness and self-control means you have to be doing that inside on your own without any external prompting from me, from a device, from any kind of other technology. That's self-awareness.
Yeah, I could sit here and have fun with you all day with this topic. Because like at the end of the day,
I was looking forward to this, Ben.
There's so many examples. Like back in the old days, if I were to find out how much money I had, like I had to like walk down to the bank account or walk down to the bank, stand in line, go to the teller and be like, hey, what's my balance? And like they would look it up in some filing cabinet and like figure out the ledger and then push me a receipt back and like show me what my balance is. But like, I don't go through all of that because like I want to, because like there's other things to life, because I believe that AI can lead to, if we don't have to do all of those other things, then we hopefully can be more creative, more loving, be more present. Like we can be more present with each other. So like, I believe there's a lot of other benefits that outweigh some of the fears, because like it's easy for us, because I feel like I don't want to be like the farmer that said like, oh my gosh, like AI is going to take all my, like no one wants to go plow a field by hand and dig up shovels and stuff like that. And so when the plow was created, like everybody's like happy. Nobody ever says, oh, let's go back to plowing the fields by hand.
I totally agree with you, Ben. And I do think that there are times and places to use technology, but technology is growing at an exponential rate. And the problem is our mental and emotional health is not increasing.
But what if I tell you that, what if I told you,
rate.
But what if I
it's
told you,
decreasing.
But what if I told you the things that I'm learning about AI are actually helping me with mental health and emotional intelligence and being able to actually like, it's like a, what I call it, the power Joni robot, that I have access, right, to information again, maybe because maybe I'm a little bit more aware right now. And I'm like, I've went to the sessions, but then I'm like taking that, like, all right, I want more of that. And so it's actually helping me reprogram my body to get into to get in a better headspace. So like, to me, like,
so that's great. And so for you, if you're using it skillfully, then that's great. And that works for you. The problem is, I think a lot of people don't use it skillfully. I think they become, I mean, you know how easy it is to become addicted to something.
Oh, it's like, right? Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm addicted to everything.
And so people
it's like it's like social media too. You could say that about, you could say that about everything. Like
not everything, but yes.
I mean, just about everything in life. Like I feel like,
so we need to have balance with everything. And the problem is that
that's a whole other podcast.
People are not having balance with utilizing these kinds of technology in the same way that people don't have balance with social media. And we can see that in kids these days. And again, how, with the exponential growth of technology, we are more stressed, depressed, and anxious than ever as human beings worldwide. That's worldwide. I mean,
I just think we know about it more. I agree with you, but I just think it's because there's more awareness, because we know about it, because of the technology allows us to see it faster. Where before, let's just say 50 years ago, I still think these humans all had these same problems. Nobody just talked about them and nobody shared them with everybody. So like, I believe
in some contexts, I believe that that's true, but we are more isolated now than ever. We have less face-to-face conversations.
We're more isolated now. Mm-hmm. See, I believe
we
that
have connection on social media, but that does not have the same positive impact on our brain, on our nervous system, or sense of connection when we're having online interactions with people. It's different than face-to-face interactions.
That is true, because I did start only doing in-person podcasts versus the virtual podcast. So maybe there is something to say to that.
Yeah, because if we were on Zoom right now, I think we'd be having a different interaction.
Well, yeah, I stopped doing virtual because I was like, Plus, I needed to see how people are reacting so I could press more buttons, ask deeper questions.
I was waiting for you to do that.
I mean, I do find it interesting because like your husband says, like it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere.
So we have to learn to use it skillfully. All I'm doing, I'm not damning technology and saying that we should never use it. It is here to stay. And there are certainly times when I use technology. So it's not that I'm in the camp of saying, I don't think we should ever use this. It's evil. I'm saying we need to have an abundance of caution with it. And there's a lot of experts that also agree we need to have an abundance of caution.
I agree. Elon Musk says we need to have an abundance of caution, and he's probably the guy that's probably trying to like get it all going anyway.
Absolutely.
So, and I mean, I do. Yeah, I don't think anybody's debating that. I believe though that in a world where I think that it can help you, if there's a listener out there saying, because there's the curve, like you have the innovators, the early adopters, like, the middle people, and then the laggards that are like, it's like your grandparents that were like the last one to use a debit card or a credit card, right? Like I ain't using that. Eventually like 2 months before they died, they actually finally swiped their credit card. I'm like, whoa, that's how I think about like AI to like humans. And so I just believe, I just believe that you, if it's going to help if it has the ability to help someone, that staying in a state where like, no, I'm not using that. And then they're still staying in this miserable state and they're not seeking out help. They're not calling a coach. They're not calling a therapist. They're not trying to grow anyway. Don't you think I think it's going to help speed up the good people to then help the people that, when I say good, I don't mean good or evil. I just mean like the people that are more aware, more conscious. I think it's going to help, because I think if this the universe, this world increases the conscious level by like 10% and 10% of the world becomes conscious, I think it'll change the world. I totally believe that all you need is 1 out of 10 people to be at a high level of consciousness to be able to help change and elevate the other 9 people in their surrounding to elevate them up. And I think that the best way to do that is through this collective intelligence, believe it or not, being able to be more connected, because we all are connected.
And again, I'm not discounting that. I'm just suggesting that particularly around certain things, like we need to be cautious with letting AI write everything for us.
Okay, everything. That's very. But eventually, though, I'll be able to create the Ben Fisher thing where you'll not be able to tell the difference. And if I could spend more time with my baby, raising my baby and being present, and to where like, guess what? All my social media posts were like Benny Fisher, and you can literally not tell. I mean, right now you can tell the difference between my AI post. I already know you can. I do it on purpose because I love the people on social media that be like, oh, good chat GPT post. And I'm like, yeah, dude. Like, and I don't hide from it. I'm like, yeah, it helped me spit it out faster so I can go do other things, because like, I don't want to be on social media, but I also know that I have a voice and I know people are watching. And so I want to be able to get out good content. But whether that content is perfectly word for word from me or I got assisted by it, like what is the difference? Because at the end of the day, we're all getting assisted. Like you're helping me with things when I meet you in person. And so is this thing. To me, like I look at it very.
So one of the other cautions is knowing where you're getting your content from, because again, ChatGPT or other, AI type bots like that, it pulls information from everywhere. So,
well, sure, you gotta like you still have to be like the
discerning.
Well, you still have to sign off on it and send it out, and it's gonna be dang on you, good on you if you like whatever the piece is. I mean, at the end of the day, like the people are gonna judge, I guess, and like they're gonna, that's what they're gonna want to do. I mean, some people are gonna be like, oh well, that's smart. That's how he gets to live a life by design. He gets to spend all this cool time with his family. So
the other thing I hear, Ben, and this is a good thing, is that your intention of using artificial intelligence is so that you can enjoy more time with your family,
or just be more present with myself, to have alone time with myself, so that way I don't have to keep doing. So
that is great, but you own your own business. There are a lot of workplaces, from what I have heard, that they expect more out of their employees, because if they're using artificial intelligence to help them do their job, then, they should have more free time. So that means they should work more. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, if we're using AI to help us, what are we doing with the free time?
Well, I believe and this is we probably got to cut this podcast short, but I believe in capitalism will sort all that out. So I believe that those bosses that do that, because to me, I literally want to just make whatever, I don't care how you get the job done, as long as you do it like with these core values and customer satisfaction, employee happiness. Like, I don't care if it takes you 30 seconds to do it or 1,300 hours. At the end of the day, like I'm like, you are getting paid based on like what you're worth.
Right.
And so in a truly entrepreneurial capitalistic society, I believe that that'll all get sorted out.
Well, I hope you're right, because you're right, because you're then you're being a fair
that's
employer.
That's good intentions though. But that's why I also big into blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, because it's all the social proof is there. You can see the good and the bad guys. You can see the good characters and the bad characters. Well, right now everything's very hidden, and people can hide behind. They can build up walls, right? Just like we do in our personal self, like with our own traumas and things like that. We build up these layers. Well, people do that in their businesses and their lives and everything like that, and you can't see anything. Well, in the Ben Fisher world with AI and blockchain, like you can't hide, and you will see the good and you will see the evil. And to me, like it's just more transparent, it's more authentic. But we'll leave it at that because this has been a good conversation. See, I get that's the first time I got Cody. I don't really ever get too like that on the podcast, do I?
Yeah, that's pretty heated.
I expected Ben to get fired up in one way or another.
All right,
because I push Ben.
That's because you have a little bit more of a dominant personality for your average therapist. I will say that. So, and I also think that's why you're going to see more and more men, because I agree. I love that about you, because like I'm not,
push back.
I'm not going to say, I mean, I've had many therapists in my life and most of them were kind of wimpy in my opinion. But now listen, that wimpy might be good for another client.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that may be perfect for another client. One last question. We'll get back on what you do. How does somebody go about finding the perfect therapist for them? And like, what criteria would you suggest people use to do that?
That's a really good question. That's a really hard question, because different therapists resonate differently with different people. There might be some people who really don't like my style, because I do push. Like I give homework. I want to see people improve, because I don't want the clients who come to me to stay with me forever. It's fine if they want to occasionally come and check back in, but I want them to be happy and go live their functioning life skillfully. So it depends on what you want. Some people might want a therapist, just someone to go and talk to every week. So it really depends on the individual and what you're looking for. Psychology Today is a good place to go and find listings of therapists, and they often have descriptions of what kind of therapists they are. I think I call myself a directive therapist or mindfulness-based therapist. But unfortunately, sometimes it takes trying out a few people and getting a feel for them to see if they're the right fit for you. Some therapists will talk to you on the phone for a few minutes before a session, and maybe you can feel them out in that way, ask the questions that you need to ask and get a sense of them. I know I will often do that with new clients just because I want them to know if I'm a good fit for them or not, and vice versa.
I just thought about something. You're going to hate me. I just thought about this idea that I could use artificial intelligence to help match therapists with the right client based on like the same algorithms that probably Facebook, Instagram uses for friends, and like Tinder uses, like swipe left. So, you know what I mean? Like that same type of like, hey, you put in everything that you like and don't like. All the therapists put in all their information about what they don't. And then like there's this match philosophy where like you can then be more instantly paired with someone that's going to be probably have a better success rate with you. What do you think about that? Maybe talk to your husband about that. See if you can develop that. I think that would be great. And that's one good use of technology, using the technology to like filter through, because at the end of the day,
there's a thousand therapists
you found that like you could do a discovery call with someone in a half hour, think they're a good fit. 6 months later, they're not doing the work. They're not doing this. It's usually a personality issue.
Right.
It's not necessarily the content. And it's like, we got to part ways anyway, whether they part ways, you part ways. All it does is speed it up a little bit to just make those matches. There's 7 billion people in this world.
Oh, you're right. And I totally agree. That might be a good way to create a good fit.
We got it coming over to Benny's side.
I didn't say that wholeheartedly.
If you guys got value out of this podcast, like, subscribe. If you have questions for Joni, drop them here. I'll make sure she answers them. And check out our website. You can help anybody, right? Like you're not bound by like any like state lines or anything like that, because you're a coach, right?
I am a coach, and I don't accept insurance. So insightwithjoni.com, and my book is called The Space to Choose: A Path for Life Mastery, and it's out on Amazon probably by the time this podcast gets released. We're going to do an event or a conference together, big one. And yes, I think we should do one on the AI thing. I like that. I look forward to that. That'll be a great debate. See you guys next week.